Welcome to SpockCast. This is episode 59. My name is Tim Mitchell, and I am in Toronto, Ontario, and I'm joined once again by, wait for it, Jaime Lopez Jr. in Seattle, Washington.
How's it going?
We also have Jonathan Kuline in Mississauga.
Hello there.
On the line for those of you transporting at home. Alrighty, so let's dig in. Some quick fact check from last week. I was talking about a show that I'd seen. I couldn't remember if I saw it on Netflix or whatever, but the name of the movie is Atari Game Over, and it sort of goes through and documents the whole sort of rise and fall of the Atari company, goes through all sort of, how they got to, the arcades and how they got to the consoles at home, how, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak were sort of involved with them for a bit, and even the sort of evolution of, at least I think it's this show, the evolution of PlayStation and Nintendo. Maybe I've got the wrong show, because that wouldn't necessarily be Atari, right?
Yeah.
Would it?
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, okay, it must have been another show I was watching too. I'll have to find that one then. But yeah, it was fascinating. It was like this Atari Game Over does sort of cover the whole thing, like with the burying of the ET games and the unearthing of them and all that kind of stuff. And but there was another show that I saw that was, I'll find it for next week, about which covered sort of the Sony Nintendo deal and how at the last minute, I think it was Sony decided not to go in a sort of partnership with Nintendo, which pissed off Nintendo, which is how they came up with their system afterwards, because Sony released the PlayStation, right? And I think we did talk about this. Isn't that one where I sort of said the guy walked up everybody's waiting for the announcement that the guy was going to unveil the new Sony PlayStation pricing and all that kind of stuff, and he just walked up and said $299.
Yeah.
Walked away.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, that was that particular documentary, if you will, where that was spoken. So we've talked about that on the show before. I'll have to find that from previous days. But I'm going to hand over the microphone to Jaime Lopez Jr., who's going to give us the COVID-19 rundown.
There's a lot of stuff that's been going on, a lot of impacts, and probably even more by the time this episode comes out. As we record today on Thursday, March 12th, it's nutty. So locally, for the Seattle area, Emerald City Comic Con has been canceled or delayed. I can't remember on that one.
Yeah, it was postponed anyways.
Yeah. Many other cons of a similar type are happening. Other festivals like Coachella. It looks like Pearl Jam had some sort of tour that was going on. The Zach Brown Band. Major sports like the NBA, NHL, MLB, MLS. I didn't know what NLL is.
Oh, it's National Lacrosse League, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Lacrosse as well, wow.
So just about every sort of sports thing that you could imagine is they've been suspending their seasons. So it started out with games being postponed or delayed or getting moved around, and then ultimately let's just hang on for a while here. And then in film and TV, we've got A Quiet Place 2 that's being delayed. Very similar to what we talked about with No Time to Die, the James Bond movie. F9, the Fast and the Furious sequel has been delayed. It looks like the filming of the Riverdale TV show, the Mulan movie. I have no idea if I missed anything else.
It feels like everything is shut down. Anything that involves a mass crowd. I got an email from Live Nation that Live Nation has put a hiatus on all concerts for the next, I think they said 4 weeks. So pretty much any concert that was scheduled from mid-March to mid-April is postponed. So yeah, it feels like the whole world is shutting down in an effort to try and reduce the spread of this pandemic, which, as of right now, obviously there are plenty of cases in Canada now, but all things being equal, it's less than 200 across our country. And, that's known cases. Things are a little more dire, obviously, in a few other countries. And I think it's expanded into 30 plus countries now. So, I mean, how are you guys feeling about all this as far as your impact on your lives?
Just to sort of throw a couple of names into the ring there, our own Prime Minister, his wife came back from the UK and she had some symptoms. So she's being tested and they've both been self-quarantined.
Yep.
He worked from home today. Tom Hanks and his wife,
right.
Rita
Wilson.
What's her last name?
Rita Wilson.
Rita Wilson. They've both been confirmed to have COVID-19,
and they caught it in Australia when he was there filming a movie. Yeah,
and so there's been a lot of companies have been shutting down. There was a case at RBC, one of the buildings at RBC shut down. Our Raptors were playing against the team that had the team. They were playing the Utah Jazz on Monday night, and that was where the first
confirmed case of an NBA player.
They played the night before, right?
Yes. Well, so they played on Monday, and then last night was when they diagnosed and they found out that was Wednesday night. But 2 days later, and then this was somebody who they were out there on the court banging bodies with. So the Raptors have gone into self-isolation as well. They've basically been told to lock themselves up for 14 days and then to report in if they have any symptoms. They've all been tested.
We talked about this obviously yesterday on More Than Just Code. There's a lot of tech companies have all shut down. The big players, the big guys.
Yeah, Google I saw did that.
Twitter, Google, Apple. Yep. And a lot of conferences have been canceled. But we talked about another thing yesterday, which is called flattening the curve, and this is there's basically a bell curve. I forget what Mark called it, another type of curve. But anyway, there's maybe Jaime can tell me because he's a computer science guy. But it's shows like if you don't do any sort of preventive measures, you'll get the same number of infected people, but it'll peak much higher and way higher than what our healthcare systems can handle. Whereas if you practice things like washing your hands and staying safe distances from people, or not gathering in large groups and possibly transmitting amongst that large group, then you end up flattening that bell curve down to a point where it's hopefully just below the capacity that health services can muster, right? And basically, it's not to say that any less people are going to get infected, but it spreads it over a longer period of time, so it actually looks like a wider curve, but it's lower than a peak curve. So hopefully that's what all these measures about shutting things down are about. It's not about people being panicky or whatever. It's statistics. It's science basically saying it's inevitable that certain number of people are going to get infected by this thing. Hopefully by that time we have a vaccine or some sort of treatment. But you want to try and mitigate the level of harm and spread that they can have, right? So here in Toronto, they've extended the March break for kids to 3 weeks. I'm sure your kids are just horrified by that idea.
Oh, they were so sad. I mean, I can't even put it into words.
They're very stoic. I'm sure they were very stoic and stern, and the least they could do, right, kind of thing.
To be fair, I did speak to my eldest son after I got home from work today, and I said, so how you feeling about all this? And he said, I will genuinely miss my auto shop class. I was like, well, that's progress. All right, there's something. Yeah. But I don't think he'll be missing. I don't think he'll be missing his academic chemistry class. That's been a busy one for him this year.
Yeah, I mean, we had a strike when I was in grade 11. We had a strike for about a month or something. And we got to stay home and whatever. But you kind of miss the social aspect of going to school and hanging out with people and getting, beat up by people and, ridiculed and all that kind of hair pulling. You miss that stuff, right?
I think maybe I had a different experience, but I wouldn't have missed that.
Maybe you were pulling hair. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so flattening the curve.
Yeah, it's funny because this social distancing is the term that's popped up over the last few days. Social distancing. I said, I have a 14-year-old. I'm well aware of what social distancing is. I can completely spot it a mile away. It involves a 14-year-old with a pair of headphones sitting in front of a computer all day.
Right.
Uh-huh. But I mean, it's a weird one. I mean, I just obviously again, it hasn't really hit a very serious concern level here, except for the fact that I stopped to get groceries on the way home, and just like everywhere else, like the toilet paper aisle is demolished and people are just like cramming their baskets full of ramen noodles, and it's amazing how quickly people buy into the fear and the hype when again I work in healthcare here in Toronto, and we're constantly monitoring these things through our federal government's healthcare and Health Canada, the Public Health Agency of Canada, and they keep saying yes, this is a concern, these are the precautions you should take, and they're not saying end your life. They're not saying don't go outside. They're saying be vigilant and be cautious and be clean, and yet people are treating it like this is the beginning of The Walking Dead.
Well, I mean, so the other thing too is like I had a doctor's appointment for tomorrow, and I'd already gone and had my blood test done and stuff like that. Fortunately, I found a secluded lab to go to. It was like I was the only person there on Sunday morning. But my doctor called me like a couple of hours ago and said, "Hey, listen, we're trying to mitigate. We only want people coming in if they're really, really sick kind of thing to the hospital area. So he said, let's do this over the phone. So we went over my results on the phone. And so I, got, the kind of consulting I would have normally gotten in his office, but without having to take myself and put myself into a potentially dangerous environment, right? So that's how it's affecting my life. I'm happy that happened, because I was a little concerned about us walking into danger zone, as it were, right?
Yeah. Are you so obviously the one of the messages that they've relayed is that obviously the older you are, the more at risk you are at this point. It seems like
don't bring that one up. So thanks for reminding me, Jonathan.
That say if someone were in the ballpark of an older demographic, they might be a little more concerned about this potentially catching this virus.
That's true.
Does that weigh on you a little bit?
It does. Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, it's big. Like we were, sort of tongue in cheek at work as we were looking at the numbers, sort of saying, where's the cutoff line? I'm in my 40s. Is that bad? Like it's, you're sort of trying to look for any glimmer of hope in what is a very scary situation. But boy, it's a weird thing that's sort of happening where people are, a few of my friends take the TTC and they say all you have to do is cough lightly into your elbow or have a sneeze.
Everybody moves away,
and people scatter around you, and it's this kind of sort of the fear, the paranoia, the racism. These are just such unhealthy ways to deal with this crisis. I guess it's human nature to fear.
Well, like today downtown, I don't know if I mentioned it, but the subway was half full, less full than I would expected. Kind of like it is on a Friday, right? Today, and then when I was down in one of the busier cafeterias near my office, one of the food courts, right? Mm-hmm. Normally you're struggling to find a seat. It was like 3/4 full. It was like, it was 3/4 empty, I should say. It was like, there's like plenty of empty seats. So clearly people are heeding the warnings and working from home as much as they can and that kind of stuff, and not coming in, right? So, yeah. Anyway, let's move on to the, as Jaime likes to say, let's move on to the puppies section of the show.
Bring us some good news, Jaime.
Yeah, I don't know how great news it is, because this is one of the few movies that has not been delayed, as far as I know. But it is exciting to see the final Black Widow movie trailer that shows us more of what's going to happen there and get people hyped. Ostensibly to come out in the summer. Who knows? Who knows at this point? So
what are the details you spotted in this one that you like or don't like?
I thought the Taskmaster, the character that she's fighting against, is interesting. It seems like I'm sort of vaguely familiar with the character in the comic books and how he has either studied or he has like a computer program or something that helps him fight as if he is other people.
The comic book character is basically that this character has this incredible capacity to study somebody's moves and instantly be able to replicate them. And so it's almost like an ability, like a superpower. He can basically watch Captain America fight and then do all of his moves. He can watch, Daredevil or Spider-Man, and he can just mimic that. And he's always been a character that I've really gotten a kick out of, because he can pretty much become a match for anybody just by sort of seeing what they're doing. So it'll be interesting to see how they realize that on the screen. Obviously, if he's, fighting against somebody like the Black Widow, who's supposed to be this master of martial arts, it'll be interesting to see if they have some really cool martial arts scenes.
Yeah, they also seem to make a lot of use of a shield very similar to Captain America. So I wonder if he's also studied the Captain as well and is going to fight using his style. Mm-hmm. It's hard to tell from just a handful of movie clips, but it makes sense given what I knew of the character and the way you described him as well.
It would be interesting to see if maybe he's going to be all the Avengers or something, like maybe have to be fighting against all of her sort of compatriots in its own way. But yeah, you're right. And the mask and everything looks pretty badass.
All right. So you got some more sad news first, Jonathan?
Well, I don't know how to feel about this one. This could be taken as bad news, I guess. So we got confirmation that we're getting a third season of Netflix's reboot of Lost in Space.
Right, yeah.
However, they've also announced that this will be the final season. So if you read the story that we'll have in our show notes from Entertainment Weekly, they say that Netflix is pulling the plug on this series, but then they also speak to Zach Estrin, who's the showrunner. He says 3 years was always the plan. This was supposed to be like a beginning, a middle, and an end. So I don't know. I guess if this was sort of the intention and this is sort of how they want to tell this story, you can't begrudge that. But I've enjoyed that series a lot, and I think it would have been nice to sort of see how long it could have gone for. Although I don't know how long you could drag that premise out and still make it satisfying.
So the thing about it is Lost in Space was actually the Space Family Robinson, right? Back in the day, and it was campy, it was put up against Star Trek, which was it had no hope in comparing itself to that at all. Mm-hmm. There was very little science in it. It was kind of a Gilligan's Island in space sort of thing. So you were concerned about the characters every week, and you wanted to see what kind of mess they could get into and how they would get out of it. So from that point of view, it was an interesting thing, and because it seemed sciencey, it kind of had some sort of interesting to it, and then interest to it. I mean, and the reboot, it's kind of like you remember Battlestar Galactica in the original one in the 80s was pretty bad.
It was, in fact, quite.
It was quite bad, yeah. And I mean, the movie was also horrible too, but the compared to things like Star Lost and whatever, which is kind of borrowed from. But and it was it was put up against Star Wars, right? Which was again not another hope of capturing that sort of thing. But the reboot of Battlestar Galactica was so phenomenal. Like the way they took the same idea and the premise, and they kind of wrote a new sort of story and a new sort of lore around it. It was a fascinating show. Notwithstanding the all along the Watchtower stuff, but
yeah,
it was good from that point of view. And Lost in Space is kind of interesting too. But what I really liked about the original series was the interplay between Will Robinson, the robot, and Dr. Smith, right? Mm-hmm. And the way they've written these three characters, I mean, the only one that seems to be consistent with the original series is Will Robinson, right? Because the robot is made out to be some sort of alien species, which is kind of like odd. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Smith is just, a schmendrake like the original one was, but not quite as lovably campy as Jonathan, what's his last name again? Jonathan, anyway, the doctor, Zachary Smith.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he, not Jonathan Winters, it was like Jonathan something. He was actually my favorite Martian too. I think he was in that show.
You keep vamping, I'll find it for you.
Yeah, so anyway, he was interesting. He was sort of, he was akin to the Joker and the Riddler kind of style in terms of how, like in the original Batman series, the 66 Batman series, kind of they were arch criminals, but you couldn't take them too seriously, kind of thing. So that was a fun show. I mean, but yeah, it totally couldn't, if they rebooted it, it would be kind of, it would be super campy as opposed to as campy as it was, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm happy to, happy to see the characters move along, but the story is kind of going in a completely different way, and it seems to be much more mature, much more adult science fiction-y kind of thing with the colonies and the controversies and the every man for himself kind of attitude that they have. It's a bit like Walking Dead in space,
Yeah, although I will say I have enjoyed. I mean, it's Jonathan Harris, by the way. I looked it up.
Thank you.
I will say I have enjoyed the sort of balance that they've tried to put into it, with the balance between the sort of the ages of the three children, and then the interplay between the mom and the dad, the John and Maureen characters, Molly Parker and Toby Stevens. I think
Canada's own Molly Parker.
Oh, I love Molly Parker so very much. I think we talked about this previously, but I think they've done a good job of sort of balancing out sort of the sort of kid themed story along with the sort of the teen story, and then the sort of young adult story, and then the adult story. And I think they've actually done a nice job of balancing the adult story against the kids story so that it's not too heavy all the time. There is still a little lightness to it, and I think that's what has actually kept me wanting to come back to that series. I wasn't really sure what to expect. I think I was thinking maybe like Lost in Space, the movie that came out in the 90s, or the campiness.
Oh, yeah, that was pretty bad too.
Or the campiness of the original. But what I've enjoyed about this one is that sort of like compared to a lot of the adult science fiction that is very prevalent nowadays, it does have a little bit of that sort of child, through the eyes of a child kind of, wonder. There's a lot of moments of Will Robinson just, with wonder looking at things and enjoying and just being amazed by the intricacies of space and space travel and stuff like that. There really is a sort of sense of wonder to it it's quite compelling.
Yeah, I think that the interplay between Will Robinson, the robot, and Jonathan Harris as Zachary Smith, they it was like the robot and Will Smith as a combination were smarter than Dr. Smith, who was always trying to like Gilligan, he was always trying to get his way, get out of things, or get himself rescued and leave everybody else behind, kind of thing, which is similar to what this current Dr. Smith is doing. But that was fun, but this show, the writers have just gone a completely different direction. Like Will Robinson is still a pretty intelligent kid, but he kind of gets himself into jams and stuff like that. But But you're right. There is quite a difference between what's happening in the kids' lives and the adult lives, and the whole colony conspiracy thing that seems to be brewing, right? So I don't know if you can tie it up in another season, though. Right?
I don't know. I think
are they going to leave them lost in space? Or are they going to land on the planet they were heading to, or what's the story, right?
Yeah, I guess that's the question: is a happy ending them getting where they were going, or is a happy ending just them being together and safe?
Yeah, I don't know. Will they discover a Borg transwarp conduit that they can flip through, right?
Yeah. You'll be assimilated, Will Robinson.
Yeah, anyway, like you have 3 episodes left, and so you pull out the old transwarp network trope.
What kind of crazy show would do something like that?
I don't know. I have no idea.
All right.
I can't imagine one. Anyway.
Next story I've got was an interesting one. So the novelization of Star Wars Rise of Skywalker is just come out. Long since the movie came out. And like most novelizations, it contains a lot of backstory and detail that isn't available in the film, just due to time. One of the things that came out in a review of this, and it immediately popped up on Reddit and then got picked up by the more mainstream media, was that there's a little clarification over who exactly Rey's parents were. So the story goes originally in...
Wasn't Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen?
No, strangely not. So the story was in Last Jedi that her parents were nobody, and then in Rise of Skywalker it was revealed that her parents were actually her father was actually Palpatine's son, and that she is a Palpatine. So it actually, in the detail in here in this story that's been done, is that Rey's father is not actually a son, but a quote not quite identical clone of Palpatine.
But
so according to this is a story on Reddit.
It's not enough that they're related, right?
Rey's father is described as, quote, a genetic strand cast and, quote, useless, powerless failure who is despised by Palpatine on account of his, quote, disappointing ordinariness. The boy's only worth, though more through more natural methods, was able his ability to continue the bloodline. So that's weird.
Yeah, it's weird considering that Rey is such a kick-ass Jedi type. How did she inherit that? Is it like baldness? It skips a generation or what?
Yeah, midichlorians. I don't know. Yeah, but it's a weird twist on an already weirdly twisted and frankly unnecessarily convoluted bit of storytelling to wrap up that saga. So yet another weird little bit out of this last burst of Star Wars.
I had to think of it as being like the movie Multiplicity, the 1996 comedy with Michael Keaton.
Wait, are we talking about the current episode of Picard, or is that coming later?
It's coming later, but in this one, Michael Keaton's character clones himself to be in multiple places at the same time because he's overworked dad sort of thing, right? And he needs to do more stuff to fix his relationships and handle work and all that stuff. And they distinctly have a point that a clone cloned itself. Spoilers for 1996 movie, and it was dumber than the rest of them. And I kind of feel like this guy.
Sometimes when you make a copy of a copy.
So it feels like this guy was the dumber one. Look, he's not force sensitive at all, and then presumably Rey gets the genetic pieces she needs from the mother. Filling in the flaws in the Palpy failed clone.
I think there's an excellent spoof episode or Robot Chicken episode to be written about this.
Interesting. Yeah.
Next thing, so we were talking earlier about the Nintendo PlayStation. So there was a few prototypes made between this one-time proposed partnership between Nintendo and PlayStation, where they were going to work together to do the next system, because Sony wanted to get into gaming, and Nintendo was looking for a partner with expertise in the disk drives, and so they did a couple of prototypes, and then
Nintendo already had the consoles in the arcades, right? They already had Mario and Donkey Kong and stuff.
No, this came later. This was actually in the early 90s. So this was after Sony hadn't entered the system wars yet.
Yeah, this is what I was saying before. They got together to try and do something together, right?
Yes. So Nintendo had already done the NES. They'd done the SNES. They had done the Nintendo 64, and they were looking at trying to get into a sort of a next level of the market to compete with some of the other rivals in there. They had talked about this partnership. They had done a few demonstration models, and then the deal fell apart. They went their separate ways. So a few of these prototypes, rumored to be around 200, were created. None of them were ever sold. However, and when the deal fell apart, they were theoretically supposed to be destroyed. However, as goes with these things, not all of them were. So one of these ones turned up in an attic a few years ago, and it was put up for auction recently, and it just sold for $360,000 US. Okay, making it the most valuable console system as far as I know. So the person who bought it... But does it play
Echo the Dolphin, though? That's what I want to know.
No, well, it doesn't even say that it plays any games. It does look weird. It does look like a PlayStation and a Nintendo had a baby. It's pretty weird.
Right, yeah.
It has the branding on it that says Sony and PlayStation and Nintendo. So the person who bought it was the founder of Toys.com and Pets.com, who apparently, when he sold his businesses to Amazon, or he sold, I guess, large stakes in his company during the dot-com boom to Amazon, he ended up getting some stock, and he is thus incredibly wealthy now. And one of his passions is collecting this huge archive of original arcade systems, original home consoles. So this guy bought this system for $360,000, and he says he is going to build a museum wherein people can see these things.
Well, it does say it's essentially a Super NES with a CD-ROM drive.
Yeah.
One of 200 prototypes manufactured. A few of them out there.
Well, although, again, none have really turned up. And the rumor was that obviously they were supposed to be scrapped. They were supposed to be literally destroyed. But
they must be underneath the ET in the
that's right.
desert.
They didn't actually encase them in concrete like they were trying to get rid of Jimmy Hoffa.
Right. So, was that what they did with the ETs? They put it in a concrete bunker?
No, they actually poured concrete over the top of them. So when they went to excavate them, not all of them, obviously, concrete just creates a barrier over the top. So they basically, they had to chisel through it. There's a great, in the documentary, they showed them excavating it, and they had chiseled them out of concrete.
Right. Okay, cool.
And our last bit of headlines for the week, we lost a pop culture icon. Max von Sydow passed away this week.
He was in Force Awakens, right?
He was. He crossed into a lot of our favorite pop culture things. He was, he was in Force Awakens. He was on Game of Thrones. He was the Three-Eyed Raven in Game of Thrones. Of course, he was most famously the priest in The Exorcist.
Or the Seventh Seal.
Or, well, for those people who are fancy film fans, he was one of Ingmar Bergman's most go-to actors. And, of course, he was in The Seventh Seal. But a huge, long career filled with incredible performances. My personal favorite is 3 Days of the Condor. He's just this amazing, very, very sort of small scene as this assassin that is chasing Robert Redford around. And his performance is just amazing and creepy and excellent. And his speech at the end just gives you chills.
Good movie. Good movie.
Although I will say a very close, or maybe a 1A on that one, and I put it into the show notes, is the clip from YouTube from Conan the Barbarian, the original Arnold Schwarzenegger version, where he plays King Ostrich, and he has this great speech about how he's this angry king because he catches Conan and his two companions trying to break into his vault and steal all his stuff, and he says, I don't want all this stuff. What I want is my daughter back. This evil monster Thulsa Doom has kidnapped her, or basically helped. She's fallen in love with him and his cult and has run away, and I want you guys to go and save her and bring her back to me. But he has this great speech about, there comes a time when, gold does not shine and jewels do not sparkle, and all a man wants is the love of his daughter. And this is great. And he's just this incredible, regal performance by Max von Sydow. And that scene is just one of my all-time favorites in fantasy storytelling.
Cool. All right. Well, here we are at the part you've all been waiting for, the Picard cap, as I like to call it today. Season 1, Episode 8, the episode called Broken Pieces. So here's the question. What do you do if you only have 3 episodes left in the series? Well, you put a ton of stuff in Episode 8, right? Mm-hmm. So I have 4 pages of notes here. Kids, sit back, put your head back, here comes the drill. All right, so we start off 14 years ago. Well, I won't go through what happened last week and start. I'll skip that part. So 14 years ago, we have a cadre of Romulan women standing around this sort of illuminated ping pong table of sorts and they're being told by Commodore O, dressed in one of these black robe thingies herself. She's telling these women that they're going to see some visions if they're brave enough, and they're going to some of them might want to kill themselves afterwards, and some of them do, rather interestingly. In fact, one of the camera point of views smashes its head in with a rock, and we get to see that happen. But amongst the women that you see standing around the Romulan women standing around the this little ping pong table thing is Narissa herself, and it turns out to be Auntie Ramda, the Borgified woman who was on the captured ship that ended up. We'll talk about that later too. But anyway, the two of them are there to take in this vision, and as I said, it's so horrific. It's sort of the same sort of YouTube file that Commodore O played for Agnes earlier in the previous episode. So similar idea. They get to see all this horrors and see all this stuff that happened back in the past in Romulan deep history, and they all go crazy except for the one that's left standing as Narissa. Like, she's kind of like loving this this effect or whatever. And of course, so then that's how Commodore O takes her under her wing, and as well as Narissa, to sort of help them through this thing. And she sort of said that Commodore O mentions that this is an admonition left for us by our foremothers, to prevent the second coming of the destroyer. And those of you who survive will become stronger from having experienced it. So then we move forward to where we are today, and Narissa's visiting Auntie Ramda, it turns out, in the sick bay on the Borg ship. And she, as part of the exposition, she's telling the story about telling Narissa, who's lying there unconscious in the bed, that you seem to be malingering here, and maybe we're not sure why you're just lying here. The doctor says there's nothing wrong with you. She does explain that Auntie Ramda had taken in Narek and Narissa when their parents had died, and that, as we suspected something about these Borg. Something about the Romulans that were captured. It was Ramda's ship that was captured. Something in them must have destroyed the Borg ship, and it turned out it was actually Ramda's despair, according to Narissa. And she does at one point say, "I would have made a better Borg than you. It's too bad my ship wasn't captured." But it's kind of a weird sentiment. But yeah, she tells the sleeping or unconscious Ramda that Narek has found the planet that the synths are coming from, and the nest of synths, I think she calls them, and she's going to send them off to. She says, you should wake up and come along with us. And then she says to somebody else, to one of the Centurions, have we found the freak? And yes, he's in Hugh's office, the office of the former director. And they attack Elrond, a bunch of Romulans, and he starts, slashing them with his swords, and he's getting a little bit overpowered. And at the last minute, 7 of 9 runs in with a couple of phasers and blasts a whole bunch of people and kills them all. And then she says, "Where's Hugh?" And at which point Elrond runs up and hugs her, and they're there, it's okay, kind of thing. We're then back to the ship, La Serena, and Picard and Soji have just arrived, and we're seeing it from the point of view of Rios, who's really sort of taken aback by when he sees Soji. It's kind of like he's connecting her with somebody else. We get that sort of sense that he's been here before. And Picard's trying to talk to him, snap out of it, kind of dialogue. I need you to tell me where the nearest space station is, or point, I forget what they call it, but Deep Space 12 or DS-12 turns out to be the one that's nearby, and I want you to send him a secure link to Starfleet, and hey, wake up, I need you to do this for me. But Rios continues to be freaked out by this thing, and Picard's basically, Soji's a little upset about the whole beaming on or showing up on the ship too, and he just sort of says, you have no choice but to trust me on this. And then Raffi has a moment with Picard and Soji, and she kind of says, oh great, you've brought another homicidal double agent onto the ship, and how big a fool are you? She says to Picard. And she pulls a phaser on the two of them, and which Picard's going, hey, what's going on? And she basically says, a neuron. That's all you know about this girl. She's just based on one neuron. Like, what do you know about her really, right? And she tells Picard that we've figured out that Agnes is a Romulan spy because she had that chip inside her. And he says, is that a fact or a theory? theory? And she says, well, it's a theory. And then, we think that she killed Maddox, and well, how do you know this? And then we flash over to the sick bay, and the emergency medical hologram has proof that she basically disabled the medical bay and let him die, kind of thing, and forced him to die, sort of thing. So she murdered him, basically. And that's kind of what we kind of wondered about a couple of last episodes, is how come nobody kind of turned on the alarm and went, hey, what's going on? And, they're thinking, well, maybe the Romulans put her here to kill Maddox. Like, maybe that was their mission. And it was kind of careless to just sort of bring her along. And how do you know what Soji's really like? So Raffi's really calling him on his decisions about, just trusting these people and that kind of stuff. And so we flash forward to Picard sitting in his what do you call it? What do we call this? His vineyard office room kind of thing, his holographic office, and he's sitting across the table from Admiral Clancy, and they're sort of comparing his kind of she says, that's a hell of a report. He says, well, you thought I was nuts and senile and maybe quixotic, and at which point he says, and now the windmills have turned out to be real giants, right? So, she says, what do you expect, apology and that kind of thing? And he's, no, I want a squadron. And she says, Picard, shut the F up, And there's a lot of effing in this show, by the way. Yeah. They should buy another Val. But, so, and she says, okay, well, I'm going to send a squadron to Deep Space Nine. Stay put until I get
12. Don't get our hopes up.
Oh, sorry. 12, 9, 12. That's all multiples of 3, whatever. So then we flash over to Raffi, who's now gone to the front of the ship, and she's talking to what she thinks is Chris Rios at the con, and it turns out it's actually not Chris Rios. It's the emergency medical hologram. So apparently
No.
Sorry, emergency navigation.
There you go.
Hologram. Thank you. EMN, and he says, you can call me Enoch or Enoch, and. So, he's sort of saying, try and think of something positive about it. And he says, I don't know what it is with Rios, why he's acting so weird. Do you know where he is? He's kind of in hiding, and it seems like he knew he knew Soji from somewhere before. He goes, and Enoch, without missing a beat, says, yeah, Jana. And he goes, what do you mean, Jana? And he says, well, I can't really explain because there's kind of like gaps in my memory. And he says, ask me something about astronavigation. I can answer those questions. And so she shows him this drawing that she's got of these 8 star systems, 8 circled planets circling each other, and she sort of says a planetary system with 8 stars, is such a thing exists, and I think they call it wrote the word down, but I can't see it here, octagonal or octa something.
It's an octenary, octenary system.
I had that written down here. Where did it go? Anyway, so she says, what is this such a thing? Could a planetary system exist like this? And he goes, well, there's a case of a 7-star one, and the Romulans have accounts of it in their ancient charts, but it's apocryphal. Can't say that word.
Apocryphal.
Thank you. The word I can't say. And he sort of said, the gravitational forces would really be complex to do that kind of thing. And she says, maybe the conclave of 8 is not a group of people. Maybe it's a star system. Maybe it's a place, right? And he kind of says, yeah, possibly, whatever. And I forget why she says, but she says, you're my favorite holo.
Well, because that's a clue. Because she had mentioned in a previous episode, she mentioned the conclave of 8, and she's clearly been, as we've seen with Raffi, she's been puzzling this for a very long time, 14 years, right? So to finally have that breakthrough, she's like in love with Enoch now.
Yeah. So we go back to the Borg ship and into the room where the slaughters happened with 7 of 9 and Elron, and Narissa's there, sort of looking at all these people and realizing that they weren't cut with a big, like a samurai sword. They were shot down with lasers. Those are like blaster points to me. And she says she finds the beacon, and she says, it's a Fenris Ranger beacon, and she says, I bet you I know which one it is. And then we move on to so now we're in the Queen's lair inside the Borg ship where 7 of 9 and Elron have run off to, and she says to him, why didn't you go with them? And he says, well, because I found a lost cause greater than the one he had. So Picard had released him to deal with the Romulan, or the the Romulans versus the Borg situation. And he says, "Is this where the Borg Queen lived?" And Seven says, "No." She says, "I can either explain to you, kid, or I can steal the cube. You're like, you pick one, right?" Sort of thing. And then my favorite scene in the entire show is this Tesla lightning that goes up the big column when she activates the cube, right? Because of course we're told in the previous episode you'll need a Borg to activate this thing,
right?
So, and Nerissa's going like, "What's going on here?" to the Centurion. He goes, "I think the cube is regenerating and they're coming back to life, and what should we do?" And she says, "Should we electrocute them all?" He goes, "No, that probably won't work, but we could just open the doors and blast them off into space." And he says, "That's a good play. Let's go with that one." Then we switch back over to the La Sirena, and we see Picard and Soji are having breakfast or some sort of meal, but it turns out to be eggs, so I'm going to call it breakfast. And she sort of says to him, "You don't know what it's like to have this vacuum inside, to not really trust whether." He asks, like, "Do you like eggs? Would you prefer something else?" She says, "You don't know what it's like to not really know whether I like eggs for real or if it's just part of the data set that's been planted into me." And he says, "I can only imagine what that's like," right? And she's complaining about the fact that, she doesn't seem to have any sort of story now. She doesn't know what to trust. And Picard says, "Well, you do have a story. You have a past, and you have to figure out what that is and just grab it." And she says, "Well, tell me about Data," right? Because obviously she's been told about Data, and some of the words that Picard uses to explain to her what Data was like is he was brave, he was curious, he was gentle, he had a child's wisdom, and he made us all laugh, except when he was trying to make us laugh, right? And she says, "And you loved him?" And he kind of looks at her funny, and he goes, "Well, yeah, I guess in my way I did." And she says, "Did he love you?" And Picard just looks at her like perplexed. And he says to Soji, "Data had a capacity for expressing and possessing emotion. Data's capacity for expressing and processing emotion was limited." And he goes, "We sort of had that in common," because Picard suffers from that same issue as well. And she says, "Well, how do you hope he remembered you?" And hopefully someone who believed in him and believed in his accomplishments and his potential accomplishments, and counseled him. I don't know why that autocorrect said that, but and hopefully would get out of his way and let him do it. And she just looks at him and she says, she says, "He loved you," matter of factly, as if she knows somehow. Probably another planted idea, right? Anyway, so now Raffi is talking to the emergency engineering hologram this time with a really, I gotta say, bad Scottish accent, who calls himself Ian, and she of course he calls her Lassie, and she says, "Don't call me Lassie," and okay, I'll remember that. "Where's Rios? What's he doing?" And he says, "Well, he's hiding out. He's, the girl is, this girl has brought a lot of memories back to him that, she sort of says, "Well, what kind of memories?" He says, "Well, I know, but I don't know." He says, I kin it's true, which means no, but I can't tell you why, right? And so there's some sort of missing pieces here in all of these holograms, which we'll get to in a minute. I was thinking we should call them Holly because, from Red Dwarf, right? But then it goes, I'm sure Jaime's never seen Red Dwarf.
I haven't. Maybe there'll be like a revival or something and we'll end up watching that.
Okay, well, I think it's on the Netflix. I don't know.
It's all available on iTunes.
So I wrote down Octenary Star System. This is where I knew I'd written it down somewhere. But she's asking him about the whole engineering of an Octenary Star System, and he says, what are the odds that would happen? He says, practically none, right? So she says, well, then it would have to have been built, right? And who's got the engineering to get 8 stars, gather them together, move them across, the heavens, and then set them into motion to make this thing? And why would you do that? And he sort of said, well, they're kind of showing off. And she says, no, maybe it's to leave a warning to people in the future coming to this place, sort of a thing. And he goes, well, how does that make you feel? She says, I feel absolutely terrified by that, right? And then she's still exploring, trying to find out where Rios is. She ends up back in her room. She walks in. She says, I need a glass of wine. And of course, the hospitality hologram says, I'm sorry, but you've disabled you've locked yourself out from having alcohol, and you've put a bunch of overrides in place. You can't get past them. And he sort of, in a very strange way, kind of leans into her a couple of times when he's talking, and to the point where she actually ends up falling under her bed. And he sort of says, Rios needs someone to talk to, like nudge, nudge. nudge, wink, wink, get in there and talk to him kind of thing, right? Now, I'm trying to remember when the so he was it the hologram he was talking to about the fact that, I think the hospitality hologram tells her that, she starts to put again, puzzling things out. She kind of puts together that all of these holograms have a little bit of Rios in them because they all look like him for one thing, right? And he sort of said, when he bought the ship, he kind of turned on the self-scanning option, and then he realized that it wasn't a good idea. So she realizes that all of the holograms together kind of constitute or partially constitute what's Rios. And this is where was the name of the movie Multiplicity that you were talking about, Jaime? These are all bad, sort of flawed copies of Rios, right?
Well, it's that, or they have been tinkered with. Kind of what I was getting to that part. So he kind of he sort of says, after he realized, it was probably not a good idea to have this sort of, replicated beings based on myself, he went in and he made some deletions, and sort of carelessly in some cases, like he says, ask me how to make Iridian tea. He says, I have no idea, because he went in and erased that file too, haphazardly. But he says that, I think he's definitely in need of a confidant right now, and that's when he leans into her. So then we switch over to we switch over to Rios's room, and we're scanning by books, which is kind of an interesting thing, like printed books, bound books, something like Picard likes to collect, and a bunch of mermaids, sculptures,
or sirens, as it were.
Yeah, the sirens. Okay, I guess so. Yeah. They're all sort of I guess they're sirens as well. And then we see his Starfleet footlocker, and he focuses in on that, and he opens it up, and you see him put aside his Starfleet uniform, which he still has nicely folded inside there. He pulls out a box that has NCS 75710 printed on the side, and he pulls out a cigar box, and in the cigar box, meanwhile, Raffi comes to the door and he says, piss off. She's like, pissing off, Captain. And so he pulls out a photo of himself and his former captain, who will learn his name in a few minutes, and a drawing. And the drawing is of Rios and this Jana person who looks exactly like exactly like Soji. Mm-hmm. Anyway, back onto the Borg ship, we flash back to 7 of 9, who's standing in the middle of the Queen ship trying to activate everything. And she's talking to Elron about how they can sort of help get the Borgs to help them, and he says, well, can you just turn them back on again? And they won't work because they're too far away from the collective, but maybe I can make a micro collector, she says, and she gets a little angry about the fact that she would basically be enslaving them again, and he says, well, we can release them when we win, and she says, I might not want to release them, and they may not want to be released. So now we switch to the multiplicity scene of the movie where Raffi has finally realized, okay, let's get all 5 holograms into a room and try and quiz them about what's going on and see if we can put together some sort of picture of what's bothering Rios or what's going on here. So she basically says these are the 5 broken pieces of Captain Rio, which is where the show gets its title from, obviously. I just realized that. And she said each one of you got dealt a card. Like none of them are playing with a full deck, but at least one of them has at least one whole card. She can sort of put things together. And they all kind of know of Jenna, but they can't figure out why when they know her. They all recognize her as a tragic figure. They spill the beans about the fact that he was on the ship called the Ibn Majid, and that the captain's name was Alonso Vandermeer. And Emmett, who's I think he was the tactical officer, tactical hologram. Yeah, he's there. He sort of says something. Something happened there, and he kind of puts his finger in his mouth and sort of says, like to mime that the captain shot himself. And when she starts digging for more details, they go, don't bother looking for details. All the logs have been erased, and besides, it's all classified. You'll never find it, kind of thing. And then the Scottish dude says, and he's safe as a piper, awful flying in the fang, right? Or something like that, which I Googled and I couldn't figure out what it meant, but something like he's some type of piper. Anyway, and she looks at them and she goes, that's not even the language, like this, what does that mean, Then we look over then we sort of from Dr. Girardi lady's eyes. She's kind of being woken up now, and Picard is about to, do a little questioning of her, and she, he says, you neutralize the viridium by taking that drug that you took, and we're no longer being tracked by the Tal Shiar, or are we? And then he says to her basically, we realize that you killed Dr. Bruce Maddox, and so when we get to Deep Space 12, you're going to surrender yourself for murder. So, and she sort of says, well, Commodore O came to me and she poisoned me. She put these thoughts into my head. And he says, what? The head of Starfleet Security did this to you? Yeah, she poisoned my mind. She touched my head and put all these images into me, and she put a psychic lock in there so I can't even talk about it. And I guess by giving her this injection, she was able to, or this drug, she was able to get past it somehow. And she says, I didn't believe in hell until I actually saw what the images that Commodore O had placed into my head. And so it basically happened thousands of years ago. It turns out to be 200,000 years ago. And the point, she starts to believe what's been planted in her head, that they need to destroy any chance of any kind of synthetic life ever coming back again. And the door opens to the medical bay, and Soji says, the coming of Sebej Sheneb, the destroyer, me. So she's realized she was called the destroyer by Auntie Ramda earlier, right?
And this is the first time that, since she's just come out of her coma, this is the first time that Agnes realizes that they're there with Soji. And
right, okay.
That was like the thrill of her life. She desperately wanted to meet this synthetic person.
Right. Well, did she want to meet her before Commodore O visited her? I can't remember now.
Yeah, I think she was fascinated at the idea that Maddox had this level of breakthrough.
Accomplished this. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Finally get into Rafi's room, and he's listening to Solitude by Billie Holiday on the old jazz standard record. Rafi comes in and makes him a coffee, and he starts to talk about his former captain. He used to pretend he was my father, kind of thing, but he turned out to be a cold-blooded murderer. Now we start flashing back and forth between Soji and Agnes having conversations, and Rafi and Rios having conversations. So back to Agnes and Soji, and she's sort of fascinated. She's asking her questions about about her life as a synth. Like, do you sleep, and do you get sad, and what do you do when you get hungry? Do you eat, kind of thing? What do you do when you get thirsty? And she says, I drink. And you drink when you're thirsty. That's amazing. That's so beautiful. And we come back to Rios. He's talking about how they were sent to the Vac sector, and they came across a ship of unknown design, and they were sent there on a diplomatic mission, and they beamed the ambassador and his young protege, who turned out to be Jana, onto the ship. Switch back to Agnes and Soji, and talking about the construction of Soji, and she says, you've got a sort of a beauty mark on your face there, and that's artistry. That's amazing. And she says, well, I also have a mole on my chest and a crooked toe. And she's like, that's amazing. Like, I can't believe that's level of detail that they did. And we talked about this in the first couple of episodes of the show, where it's so convincing that people don't know she's a synth, and she doesn't know she's a synth either, right? For either her or her sister, basically you're a technical masterpiece and a work of art. And Soji looks at her and says, "Am I a person?" Right? And switch back to Rios. He's talking about how Vandermeer killed both of the ambassador and his protege in cold blood. And we switch back to Soji, and she's still questioning, "Am I a person? Not in theory. As you look at me right now, do you see me as a person? Am I a person like you?" She says, right? Switch back to Rios. He was talking about, it was basically a black flag directive coming straight out of Starfleet that, and if they didn't follow the orders, the ship, the Imagine, would be destroyed, and all the complement as well. And after shooting the two people with a phaser, Rios went at the captain. He says, I went at him hard, and I guess the captain was so distraught with what he had done, he put the phaser in his mouth and blew his head off. And that's the vision that haunts Rios, the vision of his captain's brain splattered all over the bulkhead. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so the doctor, sorry?
Yeah, that's a really graphic comeback. Yeah.
So he says that it comes back to, and he says to Raffi that, I doctored the logs. I made it seem like he killed himself for no reason at all, and basically I covered up the incident kind of thing. And 6 months later, I was kicked out of Starfleet for post-traumatic dysphoria. And then he shows Raffi the picture that was drawn, and I think I forgot to mention that they called the one synth called himself a beautiful flower, and the other one was Soji. So not Soji, Jana. And he says, "Look at this drawing. It's just the beautiful flower guy. He drew this of us, and this is the same person. This is like the splitting image of Soji." And again, this is another one of those things where the paintings that Data did and of Soji as well, right? How did he know that? And then Raffi says, "Well, who gave the order?" And so we switch back, before the answer comes back, who gave the order? And the next thing Soji says is, Commodore O, ordered you to kill me. And, she says, after having met you, I would never do that, and of course, Soji says, I would never allow you to do that, So we come back to the Borg cube now, and what's her name? Narissa is happily shooting, it's target practice, duck hunt time with the PlayStation there, and she's shooting all the XBs, eliminating them all. And I don't know if you noticed this, but they were inside the 3D printing lab because there was a couple of 3D printers on the table there. And so back in the Queen's chamber, Elrond notices that the lights are going out in the big sort of 3D display that's in front of them, and he goes, "Are those Borg life signs?" And of course, Seven's like, "Oh, real look of worry on her face," so she's got to jump into action. And the comment that Narissa says back to the Centurion is, "Something far worse is coming if I fail at my work." And they're talking about getting rid of all the Borgs that are not been. They're still in stasis. They haven't been made into XBs yet. So Seven decides to jump into action. She flips a couple of switches on the Borg thing, and the sort of these tubes come over and connect to her, and she becomes the Borg queen. And she says, "We are Borg." And then all of a sudden, all the other Borgs that are in stasis all start to wake up saying, "We are Borg as well." And at which point Narissa says, "Open the doors." They open the doors and blasts them all off into space. And to which, Seven, when she realizes what's happened, starts screaming, "No!" So anyway, I'm done. I love the autocorrect here. Soji brings Agnes back into the main crew room, and Picard and Rios and Raffi are sitting at the table, and she says, and Agnes says, "I'm done murdering people." And Rios says, "Are you all right?" She says, "Yeah, when I'm going to get to DS-12, I'm going to turn myself in. And sorry, this is the closest thing you've had to being a crew, and I'm sorry I ruined that." She drops an F-bomb as well, and she says that. Meanwhile, Rios goes over to the replicator and produces peppermint ice cream and French fries and puts them in front of Soji. And "How do you know I like that?" And he goes, "Well, obviously in the 5 minutes I met the other woman, she liked them, so I'm assuming you did too, right?" So they talk about, Raffi starts talking about her discovery about the Cadre of 8. Did I mention that yet? What do you call it? The Conclave of 8?
Conclave, I think is what they said.
Yes. Yep. So she's talking about how somebody must have gone and dragged these 8 suns into place and put them into motion and placed this planet at the middle and placed a warning there for future societies or whatever. And Agnes contributes saying that the Romulans called it an admonition, which of course she got from the planted thoughts from Commodore O. And oh yes, the warning is don't do what we did, Raffi says, and the synths have evolved, and Picard somebody makes a comment to the fact that there's a dividing line in the synth evolution where they get to a certain point, and I'm calling this Judgment Day because that's clearly what it is, right? Mm-hmm. When they become smarter than the rest of us, and they created the Zat Vash to basically live out and sort of protect this memory and dedicate it to finding and terminating synths wherever they can be found. I just wonder why they didn't do that to Data all the time that TNG was running. Oh, never mind, I won't say that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it turns out we find out that, as we suspected earlier, that, or in some ways, that Commodore O is actually half Vulcan, half Romulan. Mm-hmm. And she, basically, she's the one that came up with the attack on Mars and engineered it. Such a horrible thing that, the Federation couldn't possibly let any synths kind of, survive after that. So it made it such a horrible, sort of disaster that they would have no other choice but to have a ban, right?
Yep.
So I wrote 9 years ago emissaries, and I can't remember what that means.
So that's when we connect the dots, because then they realize that that's when Rios' ship in the Vite system ran into the emissaries. It was 9 years ago, right?
Right. Yeah, Jana and the one called Beautiful Flower. And this is they come from the planet where Bruce Maddox fled to after the ban kind of thing. At which point Soji gets annoyed and smashes the table, which kind of weird kind of behavior if you think about it.
Well, first they have an interesting moment too where she knows Jana's name before it's spoken.
Right. Oh,
she makes that connection, right? Because somebody says Jana, and she says, or somebody's about to say the name Jana, and she says it first, and then says, "I don't know how I know that."
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Right. Okay. So basically, the Zvat Vash have been searching for this world ever since. So then Soji gets up and she runs over to the comm and she starts to lay on a course, and she puts up a force field, and they said, "What's that?" And is that a map of? Raffi says, "What's that?" And she says, "It's a map of the Borg transwarp network. I just need to get back home," she says. And we're 9 hours away from the nearest node, so we're just going to jump over there and head over there. And then Rios is trying to smash at this force field, trying to get through it, and then he starts singing a Spanish lullaby, which is a secret code to disable, or I guess override any sort of the ship, and he basically takes down the force field. And then Picard says, "Well, we've tried it your way, we've tried it my way, let's try it her way now." And he sits down at the captain's seat, and they all look at him like, "Okay." And he pulls up the controls, and he puts his hands up to start making directions into the system. And he looks and he goes, "I don't know how to work this," right? And so they're getting there. And then Rio starts chastising Soji for planning this trip into this through this warp thing without setting up the defenses in the ship, and gravimetric shear be damned, you're just going to fly off into space and just destroy this whole ship. But you got to plan these things, right? And she just sort of says, "Well, Captain Rios, get me home, please, for Jana's sake," right? We switch back to the Borg cube, and Seven has now been able to get the XBs to start to play along with her, and they take out the Centurion as the nurse is walking confidently through the ship, and then she realizes that the Centurion is not answering. She turns around and she gets stormed by a bunch of Borg XBs, and she takes out a few with her phaser rifle, and then they kind of capture her and overpower her and throw her to the ground. And the very last second, you see her get beamed away, because at the same time outside the Borg ship, all the Romulan ships have all arrived to go off and find this planet that Narek is leading them to. Right?
Sorry, did you say throw her to the ground?
Throw her to the floor. Yes. Throw her to the floor. Yes, Centurion, throw her to the floor. Yeah, what was the line? What's the line he says to the Centurion? And the answer is about 11 o'clock, sir. Anyway, and of course, Jonathan loves the lines that Elrond comes up with. And so finally, Seven, he looks over at Seven and he says, "Are you going to assimilate now?" And then the Borg Queen releases Annika and says, "Annika has some work to do." So it releases her from her bonds. So Picard, and then we switch over to Picard and Rios. They're sitting in the thing as they're traveling through the space, and you hear Picard talking, and it's sort of, you got this phase shift on his voice to make it seem like he's sort of in this weird sort of transitive mode of traveling through time and space, right? And he talks about he's reminiscing about being on the deck of the ship by himself when he was an ensign, and he hadn't felt that way until just now, kind of thing. And he's talking to Rios about how he knew Captain I've forgotten his name now,
Vandermeer.
He knew Captain Alonso Vandermeer before. He basically served with an old mate of Picard's, and Rios offers up Captain Marta Benedides, and he says, "Oh, you knew her? I felt like I knew her based on the stories he told, right? And she was really a legend to the old man." And then he says, "Do you think he knew that the two emissaries were synthetic?" And he's talking about how how could he have done that? And, he says, "I knew him back in the day, and I thought he was one of the better ones at Starfleet," kind of thing. thing. And they talk about how this whole thing went down, and Picard sort of says, well, Starfleet kind of let us down before this actually happened. Like they were kind of betraying themselves. And he said we must not give way to fear, which is the challenge, right? So, and of course Rios is like, can we trust this girl? I mean, it took her like 5 minutes to hack my ship. What if they were right? What if we shouldn't have done this? And like 200. That's when we find out it's 200,000 years ago that this happened. And Picard sort of says, well, that's not what you need to worry about. Fear is the ultimate destroyer. At which point Soji comes in and says, we're here, and it takes them out of this warp thing. And as she realizes, she pulls out the compass that Kestra gave her, and it starts to point to north, so as if she's come home. And just as the show's about to end, as they come out of this wormhole, you see Narek's ship is still on their tail, so he must have figured out how they were getting there, so he must have followed them into the wormhole. So
dun dun dun
dun dun dun. Tune in next week, kids. And that basically is my recap of 5 hours later.
That was very good. That was very good.
Thank you.
It was a very dense episode. There's a lot of detail we got.
Yeah, you are not kidding. It was a real data dump at times, literally.
So, what do you think? I'll let you guys talk for a bit.
So, I have a couple of things that I spotted. If Jaime, you don't mind my chucking a few more things in there.
Mm-hmm.
When they're at the beginning of the episode, when the would-be Jatvash are standing around the cauldron like a crew of witches, they put their hands in and they have this vision. One of the visions is clearly Data's face.
Oh, really? Okay.
If you, I watched it twice just to make
eyes.
Sure.
Yeah.
It starts out as a skeleton of a synth, and then for about an eighth of a second, it flashes and becomes Brent Spiner's face as Data. So very prophetic, not just coincidentally prophetic, but very prophetic. I thought this was a good one because when Narissa is having the conversation at the beginning of the episode and she's talking to the unconscious Ramda, she basically says, the Borg made a real mistake when they tried to assimilate your Tal Shiar ship. And so we weren't 100% sure what had caused the cascade failure that had shut down and disconnected this Borg cube from the collective. But now we know that we've put all these dots together, that it was when they assimilated Ramda, they also assimilated her vision because she became one of the collective.
And her lunacy too, right?
And her lunacy that was caused by that vision. So that cascaded through them, and to protect itself, the collective cut off the cube because they didn't want that cascade of that horrific vision getting all the way through the collective. So that's why they cut them loose. That's why
they tried to flatten the curve, is what you're trying to say?
Yeah, pretty much. That's exactly what they did. Yeah. So it's good to sort of, again, it ties all those little threads together. They didn't have to explicitly say it, but they sort of tie that thread together with that very quick little scene with Narissa. Again, more data download that we weren't sure, and they sort of alluded to the mystery of, why this one cube was disconnected and left stranded in space, and why the Romulans were the only ones who, had this kind of success. And it turns out it was because this vision was so intense and immense and powerful that it basically broke this little cube off from the rest of the collective because it was so damaging. Which I thought was interesting. I looked up Ibn Majid just to sort of see if there was any more sort of threads to weave there. So Ibn Majid was Ahmad Ibn Majid, who was a 15th century Arabian navigator and cartographer. He was famous for helping Vasco da Gama find his way from Africa to India, and for helping the first navigation of the trade route between Europe and India. And his nickname is well known as the Shooting Star. So I don't know if any of that comes back around or if it ties in your minds to this episode, but I thought that was a little interesting bit of trivia that was sort of tagged in there. And the other last thing that I saw was just a weird little line when Soji was trying to take control of La Serena and said, I have to do this for my brother and sister. I thought that was an interesting line. She deliberately refers to Beautiful Flower and Janna as her brother and sister, which I think will be an interesting tie-in when we finally hopefully get to meet the rest of the synths or get some conclusion there, how they regard one another, how that connection is. Because obviously she referred to Daj as her sister, but I wonder how this collective of synths regard one another. And not dissimilar to, I guess, Data and Lore and to a certain extent B4, right? Chilean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. What was the name of Data's daughter?
Lal.
Lal. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, but yeah, lots of. You're right, man. What an episode! It was just like tied together all these little threads and sort of set the stage for sort of once they explained the backstory, they explained the conspiracy, they validated Raffi's stuff. We got some closure on the Rios mysteries. Like, well, there was a lot of stuff in there. What do you think, Jaime?
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with the way that we got to see all the emergency holograms together, right? So like the EMH we know is the medical and seems to have an English accent. You've got the ENH, the navigational one that has an Irish accent. You have the, I guess, emergency hospitality hologram. I don't know. They say Mr. Hospitality, but I don't think that doesn't fit the pattern, right? I
think he's Captain Obvious, right?
Yeah, and there's some discussion about what he sounds like. To me, he sounds like he's Southern USA in some or Midwesternish, and some people say Canadian. I don't know if there are any Canadians have ever heard like that, but maybe like Newfoundland or something. Newfoundland? I don't know.
No, it's not Newfoundland at all. No.
I've never met a Canadian that sounded even remotely like him, so I just assume maybe my set of Canadian people that I've ever talked to in my life is maybe more limited than I thought. But continuing on, there is the ETH, the tactical hologram that is Spanish speaking of some sort. People online say Chilean. I'll take their word for it. I don't know if he speaks with a particular accent, or is Santiago Chilean himself? Is that what they're going off of?
I don't know.
Santiago, but I have to look that one up because I don't know what he is. No, it says he's from Venezuela, so I don't know why they chose Chilean online. And then we met the emergency engineering hologram, which has what I assume is an homage to Scotty with the Scottish accent. Mm-hmm. So those are fun. It's been fun seeing those individually, and it was pretty fun seeing them all together when Raffi's interrogating them or questioning them, understanding what's going on.
Yeah. So 2 episodes left. I think now, as I said, I think we sort of wrapped up a lot of these sort of lingering threads and are sort of built for what should be, you'd think, a lot more pew-pew in the next episode. Although there was a fair bit of pew-pew with Elnor and Seven.
Right.
Seven doing her best impersonation of a Borg queen.
And Nerissa, she's so vehement to shoot the Borg, so she overheats the gun.
Yeah.
Right?
Your gun seems to be malfunctioning.
Sorry, I broke your gun.
Yeah, I'm still not sure. Even if the next few episodes are, an hour and a half, it kind of still feels like we'll have a lot of questions left with this go. So I think it'll lead into, a pretty heavy semi-cliffhanger to lead into season 2, is what I assume here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm still...
Well, they'll wrap up this story, though, like they did in Discovery, right? They had the search for Spock thing, and was that the second season they did that? Yeah, because the first season was the Emperor, right, in that show, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if after all this build-up that the synths will even be there.
Oh.
It's a good question.
Like the foundation where everything's gone?
Well, yeah, I wonder if they get there and then they have like an empty, abandoned place that then is the next thread to sort of get you to season 2.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Or there's, one last watcher on the wall or something where, it's one more person. But I don't know. I wonder if we're sort of being set up for, because now it feels like, it's all been culminating because the Romulans are headed there and Seven's got control of the cube and she's headed there, and the Snakehead with Narek is coming and they're headed there. Is it all sort of headed towards this big, explosive thing, or is it headed towards a big but they weren't actually there?
Well, if you think about it though, from the point of view of this whole conspiracy side of the angle, right? I mean, the fact that the Federation's been in on it, or parts of the Federation have been in on it. I mean, the head of security's in on it. That's a major piece to sort of okay, what do they do? Like there's going to be a lot of paperwork done when episode 10 is finished, right? How does the Federation come back from? It's kind of like the Undiscovered Country where they had that whole conspiracy thing going on there too, right? Like, how do they recover from that kind of conspiracy happening, right? I mean, what are they going to do? They sent a squadron off to Deep Space 12. of and to meet up with Picard, and he's not there, right? And so, how do they connect those dots? I mean, because it sounds to me, I would think that unless the synths have some sort of major defense plan, when the Romulans arrive and start kicking butt, it's going to be a massacre, right? So how do we resolve that, right? So in 2 episodes, I mean, essentially, right?
Well, I mean, now that we know there is going to be a season 2, I guess none of us have the expectation that it's going to be a big, conclusionary battle and it'll end, right?
Well, do you think they would drag this story arc across another season?
I don't think they would, but I do think that there's, obviously it can't end with a climactic battle between the synths and the Romulans. If you're going to have a season 2, that seems a bit premature. So
right. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
I still thinking that you end up with the Enterprise arriving and then in smash cut to the credits. It's like, come watch season 2. We got your money already.
Yeah, that would be an interesting twist. It really would.
I mean, they said squadron, so it could be anybody. It's like, like I said last time, the Captain Worf for the Enterprise. Hey, I picked up Geordi, on the way, and then also Riker shows up. He's like, hey, you know what? I decided to unretire to show up, get my ship too.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a ship now. Beverly's on her ship. We just brought everybody.
Sulu, yeah.
Yeah, it starts becoming like the later TOS original series movies where like everybody was a captain or an admiral. If you were the janitor, in the 60s show, like eventually you hung around enough, and I guess you got enough glory for being on the Enterprise that you would be an admiral too.
I thought there was a telling line that I don't know if we really touched on it last week, but Riker does say at one point, I still have active service, but it would take a hell of a thing to get me to come off the planet or whatever. I wonder if that was a little foreshadowing for potentially down the road.
Let's blow this thing and go home, kid, right?
Yeah, like I wonder if they were doing a real setup there.
The Millennium Falcon shows up.
Yeah, it was like an active reserve, active retirement sort of thing where maybe he has to do, like 2 weeks a year sort of thing, but he gets some sort of benefit out of it.
Yeah, well, they let him keep the shields he's got wrapped around his property.
Yeah.
True.
His home security system, his Ring cameras,
Alexa, shields up.
Yeah. Nope.
Mr. E. Bob. All right. What is up? Let's do the watch list, shall we?
Yeah.
We shall.
All right. So dig in there, honey.
Yeah, I don't know how this escaped everybody. I mean, not just us. I feel like I didn't see any fanfare about the fact that Amazing Stories on Apple TV Plus had actually started. Like we talked about the fact that it was coming. We saw the trailer, but I didn't see any sort of news about like, hey, you can start watching the episode now. And so I happened to stumble across it.
I did see some TV commercials for it the other day.
Okay, did you? Okay, good. Because I didn't see the normal sort of like, tech news or movie, TV news sort of articles of like, FYI, it started, go check it out.
I didn't notice it on my Apple TV the other day when I flipped it on,
Did you watch the first one?
I did. I stumbled across that and I said, season 1, episode 1 of Amazing Stories, The Cellar was on there. It's about an hour-long episode. Basic premise is this guy is helping his brother out to do like a home renovation in like a like 1919 era sort of building, and he ends up going back in time to that actual era from the cellar. And I don't want to spoil too much more, but it's like I never watched the original Amazing Stories, but it is sort of in the vein of like Outer Limits or Twilight Zone or Black Mirror. It's definitely not at least this episode is definitely not as dark as those. So I don't want to get people like the wrong idea, but it feels that sort of anthology episodes type of show. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty good. I'm pretty sure the main guy, I kind of recognized him. I think he might be the main character from the Maze Runner movie series. Mm-hmm. If anybody's seen those,
the kid,
the main guy, the main kid. So it was fun. I mean, I still have my Apple TV Plus subscription for like 11 more months. So I'll keep watching this. I don't know that it's going to be necessarily must-watch television for me the way that like Picard is, but I think it's good for like a Sunday afternoon sort of thing.
Did you watch the morning show at all?
No, haven't watched that one. So we finished up Servant. We finished up C. I'm probably going to start Mythic Quest soon. Yeah, I'm thinking about that one too. Yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I think I'll eventually get to the morning show, and they delayed filming on season 2, right? Because somebody contracted contracted COVID-19 in the crew or something. I thought I saw an update on that, but I don't know.
Interesting. That's a real-time follow-up. All right. So what do you got first, John?
Yeah. Again, speaking of things that sort of slipped through the cracks that I had not realized was a thing, but we had talked about Altered Carbon coming back to Netflix, and that the first season was kind of an interesting sci-fi thing. But they've also are putting out an anime movie called Altered Carbon Re-Sleeved, and the trailer went up this week on YouTube, and it looks really cool. I don't know. Again, I didn't know that this was a thing, that this was coming. So I don't know if they had announced it previously, but it's a one-off. It's just supposed to be this sort of like standalone movie, but it looks really, really interesting. Cool. And it's still set around the same main character, Takeshi Kovacs, and is tied into the regular Altered Carbon universe. It's supposed to be like a different adventure in a different sleeve that he has, and it's all done in anime style. Apparently, it's coming to Netflix on the 19th March.
That's cool.
Yeah, yeah. So not only is it coming, but it's coming quite quickly. So just in time to finish watching. Now that we have no live sports or movies in the theater, I guess we can all catch up on our Netflix shows, and you'll have just enough time to watch Altered Carbon season 2 before you watch Re-Sleeved.
Right.
Indeed.
So who put the real-time update here?
That was me. Just a couple things that have sort of popped over the wire since we started our conversation. So you had mentioned, Tim, at the beginning that the Prime Minister of Canada's wife was being tested, and they have confirmed now she does have COVID-19.
Oh, really? Wow.
And our Prime Minister will be tested, and he is also going to self-isolate for 14 days. So that's pretty up there as far as sort of people of note that have contracted that. So that would be the equivalent, Jaime, to our First Lady. And also there was news this evening that Disneyland in California is closing for only the 4th time ever.
Wow. Yeah, I think we were talking about the NHL closing down their series. They haven't done that since the Spanish flu, right? Yeah,
I mean they had the lockout season. They canceled the entire season of early 2000s. But the last time that something like this happened was 1919 was the last time this happened, and I believe Seattle was actually playing for the Stanley Cup that year.
Oh, really?
The Metropolitans, is that who it was? So the Pilots?
So it was a plot to make sure they didn't win the Stanley Cup, right?
Yeah.
Interesting.
We didn't time it like you all to maintain your NBA championship for even longer.
Jonathan, we get to be NBA world champions for another year.
Yeah, we were joking about that at work, that we should get to keep the championship banner, hang another one. Yeah, so the 1919 Stanley Cup Finals between the Montreal Canadiens and the Seattle Metropolitans. The Metropolitans were up 2-1 in the best-of-5 series when it had to be canceled due to an outbreak of Spanish flu among the two teams, and it actually killed one of the defensemen on the Canadiens, and another of their players, their manager, was so permanently weakened by his illness that it led to his death a few years later. So this was like a serious thing as well.
Yeah.
So this is learn the lessons of the past. This is why you postpone your season, right?
True.
You never want to get to that point.
Well, speaking of postponing seasons, I saw the first 2 episodes of Dispatches from Everywhere, which is kind of a science fiction-y, rompy sort of Doctor Who-ish kind of show. It's very strange and convoluted, and there's sort of this weird secret society thing happening in it. Stars Jason Segel and another actor, I can't remember her name. But it's interesting. It's kind of weird and wacky. I watched the first 2 episodes. I wasn't super thrilled enough to watch the 3rd episode, but I've set it back up in my PVR. I think I'll give it a couple more tries. Maybe I'll catch the 3rd episode that I missed because I didn't set my PVR to record that one. It's got Sally Field in it, and one other guy. I think he's the guy from...
it's Andre 3000.
Yeah, Andre 3000. Yeah. I can remember his name. But yeah, he's in it too, and he's an interesting character that he plays. But yeah, the Jason Segel's trying to figure out what the hell's going on, and the other 3 characters seem to know or seem to have some sort of idea what's going on, and it's kind of they refer to this game that's going, but haven't been able to put our finger on what the game actually is yet. So it's kind of a interesting sort of weird thing, sort of like you see characters and then they kind of run away as soon as you look at them, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a mystery.
I'm curious. I haven't had a chance to sit down and watch it yet, but I'm curious too. I heard a great
great podcast with Jason Segel talking about it, and he was saying that this was based on, he was trying to think of something to write. He wanted to do his own project again.
Oh, right.
And he said this is based on real events that happened to him.
Really? Wow.
Where he basically saw this random ad on the street and sort of fell down this rabbit hole of a weird world. And he said he wanted to just sort of see where it went because he thought it would make a great TV show. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, I think Neil Gaiman's written sort of stories like this one. Like there's one story I read recently by him about this guy who sort of stumbles into this weird world and underworld that runs around under regular London, right? And he comes out at the end and sort of, there's demons and there's, whatever. Forget the name of the book I read, but Neverwhere, is that the one? Yeah.
Neverwhere.
Okay. Yeah. Have you read it?
Oh yeah, I've read almost everything that Neil's written.
Okay. All right. Everywhere. All right. Cool. Well, I guess that's it for the week. So, hey, how many people want to get in touch with you? Where would they find you?
I'm on Twitter as @DevWithAHair.
Right. And Jonathan, people want to get in touch with you?
I'm on Twitter and Instagram as @JPK News.
Okay. And my name is Timitra, TIMMITRA, on the Twitcher machine is where you'll find me. So next time, we'll see you in the future. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, baby. Bye.
You've been listening to the SpockCast podcast. If you want to find out more about the podcast or see the episode show notes, visit the SpockCast website at SpockCast.com. You can get in touch with us on the website or follow us on Twitter at SpockCast. If you have feedback or questions, send us a tweet with the hashtag AskSpockCast. If you like the show, please consider recommending us to a friend, writing a review on iTunes, or pledging any amount at patreon.com/SpockCast. You can find details on how to help us on our website, spockcast.com/sponsor us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the future.
Social media anymore.
For what?
Just the next domino that falls. You're just
I know. It's like constant disaster.
What's that? The Prime Minister's wife has now got coronavirus. Great.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll curl up in the fetal position for a little
Yesterday
while.
It was like Tom Hanks. Today it's the Trudeau's.
Yep. I think the biggest, scariest one was when even the NCAA surrendered today and decided to cancel the championship tournaments. Because the NCAA is not well known for its sensitivity towards its competitors, and the fact that they were willing to take the humongous financial hit of not having March Madness basketball is a sign that things are definitely requiring them to close that down.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of impact. Even to the point of them deciding we're not even going to do it in empty stadiums to still get the TV stuff going. It's just it really feels like if we had a way to shut down the entire world for 4 months and then come back to it from hypersleep or something, whatever it was called in Aliens, where they go into hibernation.
Yeah.
We almost need something like that to zoom ahead on everything.
Well, they said that in places where this has been enacted in China and Italy, it has been very effective. If people are sort of confined for a period of time, even as little as a week, it really does make a huge impact on the spread and the ability for healthcare workers to treat those who have been diagnosed. And so when you put those things together and you think okay, so, China does it through authoritarianism, which, they actually are screening people, at random and, who are suspected. And if you are, they basically just haul you off and put you somewhere else and theoretically treat you. In Italy, they basically shut down the entire country all at once. So, and apparently that has really slowed the transmission rate over the last week to 10 days.
So you have to wonder if there will come a mandatory thing at a certain point. If they gave you an X number of days notice before you had to do it, could you, get enough sort of stuff to keep yourself fed and safe and everything else to sort of help slow the rate, I guess. It'll be interesting. It'll be really interesting to see how this continues to play out. I mean, the NBA said today that they are committed to at least a month of no games. I think, Major League Baseball said that they're canceled all of the rest of spring training and the first 2 weeks of the season, and then we'll reevaluate. So I think the consensus that they must be getting from the medical community on all this advice is that, we're looking at 4 to 6 weeks of really scaling things down, really reducing human-to-human contact. I wonder where this will take us over the next few weeks.
Yeah, I think that, and I'm sort of partially concerned and not so much concerned for the gig economies that are out there. They're wondering what's going to happen to them because they're not really built on any solid ground, Something like this kind of thing takes out small businesses all the time, right? Like we're already starting to worry about bars and restaurants and, those kind of things come and go all the time, right? So small theaters, movie houses, everything, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And where does the line on paranoia stop? As you know, I'm a big comic book collector and reader. And, I was out last weekend and went to a couple of comic stores and was browsing through the books and didn't really give it a second thought. Comic books, especially older ones that I'm looking for, tend to be quite dusty and, so I always, carry, hand sanitizer with me and I always use it. So I don't really get concerned about it. But obviously there is a level of exposure with something like that are handled. But I haven't really sort of allowed it at this point to sort of make me paranoid. But, where's the line on, when you go to the grocery store, you sort of think to yourself, well, okay, I'm just taking this stuff. And you're thinking, okay, somebody put that on the shelf and then somebody might have touched it as they're going through. And so where do you draw the line on where you allow yourself to go and how much contact you're allowed to have? And, it's a slippery slope. You really do just sort of have to listen to the best advice of the medical community. I honestly can't stress that enough. You really just need to understand where the clearest information is coming from. No, it is not the U.S. president, and you have to make sure that you listen. Science and medicine will lead the way. We have to trust their judgment.
Yeah, you can't buy toilet paper anymore, but I'm pretty certain you can still go buy baseball bats and barbed wire. So better stock up while you can. Throw, The Walking Dead and Zombieland double tap and 28 days later on the Netflix queue. And
that's right.
And prepare yourself.
Yeah, I was joking with my colleagues today. I said, I think we're stocked up for paper products for right now, but I might go buy a few extra just in case, because if anybody gets to the point where they're looking at my comic collection the wrong way, I think things are going to get bloody around here. That's just paper, right? No, it's not.
What, comic books? Graphic novels, you mean?
Just a big stack of them next to the toilet. No.
Well, somebody was telling me that there's some cultures where they don't. The plumbing system is so weak that they actually can't flush paper products down the toilet. So people carry a rag around with them, for wipage purposes,
Yeah. Well, there was a joke on last night's Daily Show with Trevor Noah where he basically said, oh no, we've run out of toilet paper. Whatever will we do in this room that has a shower in it? If you're really having that tough a time, it's going to be okay. You'll be fine.
Oh wait, I'm sitting on top of a bowl that has water in it.
And there's a sink next to me. Whatever will I do?
Yeah, crazy. Yeah, bidets and towels, right?
That's Xavier said earlier. I've never ever envied somebody with a bidet before, but now I do.
Yeah. Huh. What's this character? I never noticed this little character on my iPad that's got this like squiggle. Is that for writing notes? Oh, it is.
It's just in.
What do you know?
Discovered a new feature or something.
Yeah. I guess it's been there the whole time. I just never noticed it. You can actually hand write I could write cursive messages to people and they would not be able to read them.
This is true. And time follow up here. We've been wondering about Microsoft Build, considering it's occurring in Seattle in May, and they have decided to make it digital only, streaming only this year.
Well, we talked about that yesterday, right? Is that the same conference?
That was the one we said it's kind of weird that this big conference had not been canceled yet.
Yeah.
Looks like it has been, at least the physical version of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were talking about WWDC at work today, and I reminded what Mark told us yesterday that Santa Clara has declared any meeting over 1,000 people to be void and prohibited.
Billie Eilish just canceled all of her concerts for the rest of March.
Did she really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Biggest pop star in the world just canceled all her concerts.
Isn't she? Yeah, she was supposed to come to Toronto.
I don't think she was scheduled for Toronto yet.
But she soon. Oh, just for the month of March, you mean?
For the month of March so far. And
we're not going to get it. We're not going to get it out of April with this. I don't know if people realize that or not. You know, like this closing down until March is not enough.
Oh no, I mean it'll keep going, but yeah.
Apparently the stock market took another huge hit today.
They said it was the worst one day since Black Monday in the 80s. So it's
Apple's down to 248. Wow, that's crazy.
A lot of stuff, and again, like I say, no matter which direction you look, everywhere.
Wow, even Twitter's down.
And that's why you tune in to the SpockCast podcast, folks, because
we got your updates.
For at least a little bit in the middle there, we were able to take you out of COVID-19 country.
That's like our tagline, you know. So we have the one of like, you know, we're a Star Trek podcast. You know, we're on the list, and you know, the new sort of teacher could be like, what else are you going to listen to while you're quarantined? We can entertain you. Take your cares away.
That is true. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Apple
March event to launch iPhone 9 canceled over COVID virus.
Well, you can't cancel something that hasn't been announced, but it will be interesting to see what they do with what should have been the March event that everybody suspected. So, I mean...
Oh, was there supposed to be a new phone coming out in the
the iPhone SE2, so like the smaller, cheaper phone updates. And that one gets interesting. And Jonathan, I'm kind of wondering, just given the journalism background you had, so for something like our developer conference, it's kind of not too bad. Like there are options, like, all right, we can still get the content through live streaming. There's these labs where you get to talk to Apple employees, like, well, maybe you could do it through like, you know, Zoom or WebEx or something. But a big part of the Apple sort of, you know, announcing or giving previews of hardware is having journalists there in the room putting their grubby hands on stuff, which is, you know, probably something you don't want to do now. And I'm kind of wondering how that might change the perspective of things for coverage. Do you have any sort of thoughts?
I guess the question is sort of what's available. And, you know, say what you will about moments like this in history, but they do spark innovation and invention and creativity in that too. They also spark all kinds of unpleasant things. But, you know, I wonder if we're going to see some sort of moves forward in the way that we communicate with each other remotely, the way that we share information remotely, the way that people produce content, you know, differently for audiences that can't necessarily be in the room. I wonder if we're going to see any sort of leaps forward through this process. Initially, obviously, you know, just the simplest things is to, you know, if you did a real time with somebody who was on the other end of your conference and they had the device in their hand and you could say, okay, now swipe this. Okay, now swipe that way. Like you could actually sort of have a concierge kind of service that would sort of allow you to test it without being able to test it. But I wonder if, you know, if there'll be any advancements as well. Especially, I mean, you know, if you get a bunch of bored at home engineers and scientists and, you know, people who are creative, you know, and they want to find ways to, I mean, we wouldn't have known about chopstick pool if we hadn't seen the people in China who were, you know, confined to their homes, right?
Chopstick pool?
But did you guys see the videos of chopstick pool?
No.
Yeah, people were bored and they were, you know, told to basically shelter without a chance to have much time to prepare. So they were trying to amuse themselves. So they were turning their kitchen tables. They were putting pockets on the corners and bumpers on the sides and bopping using chopsticks. And I don't know what they were using for balls. Jaime, do you remember?
I don't know if it was like cherries or tomatoes or something.
It was, some sort of vegetable or something that they were using, and they were turning it into basically a homemade pool table. But yeah, again, you know, you just sort of, you know, hope for the best in these situations that there were, you know, people are going to find ways to do this. It is nice, obviously, for some of us that have the luxury of being able to work remotely. I saw the Washington Post has asked its reporters to work remotely for the time being. But I do obviously empathize. I mean, my wife works in administration at the hospital, and that requires face-to-face contact, and you worry about people who are in those kinds of situations. Her department is rehabilitation and physiotherapy, and I wonder if there's obviously there are people with chronic pain who don't want to go too long without their treatment, but there might be an opportunity to have a hiatus if necessary. But there's a lot of people in the hospital who can't either, who come hell or high water have to get themselves to work every day. Have you started working from home, Ame?
Oh, so my job that I currently have and the one I had prior were both work from home, work remotely. So I've been working remotely for years now. So there's nothing new for me. And my significant other also works from home. So there's not a whole lot of change to our daily life yet, but it's interesting to see on like Twitter or Instagram, just like, empty cafeterias, and the highway looks like it's ridiculously, really good traffic right now if you want to drive, sort of thing.
The gas prices here, I don't know how American gas prices tend to be typically lower than Canadian anyways, but our gas prices have dropped 30 cents in the last 3 weeks.
Well, that's also because the price of oil went down too, right?
It is certainly driven by that, but I think there's an element to that as well of, this is an opportunity. If you want to go somewhere, and again, if you want to take a chance, you can get cheap plane flights, hotels. If you're an adventurous person who's not worried about of contracting any illnesses, and again, statistically your odds are low at this point. I wonder, if you want to take the chance, you can probably get a good deal.
Yeah, I wonder if the stock market's going to rebound tomorrow or not.
I mean, eventually it will. You'd think there would hit a point where people will realize you're some of these stocks, you're just never going to get a chance to get them this low again. And if you are bullish on the fact that eventually there'll be a rebound, you could you're going to buy Apple at, what was it, $250?
$248 right now.
Like, what was it 6 weeks ago?
$340.
Yeah, so
it's down $100.
Yeah, and again, unless you think in the long term that this is the end for Apple. Yeah, no, it's not the end for Apple at all by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah, so again, for people who are able to afford and have the capacity to gamble, you're going to hit a number where you might think, throw a couple bucks towards that, and then the market starts to turn. So somebody asked me last night, we were hanging out with my journalism friends, and they were saying, "At moments like this where you miss being in a newsroom?" I said, "Oh no, no, I'd be working 16-hour days. Are you kidding me?
How would you keep up with what's going on right now?"
Well, that's it. Like in my last job, working in a newsroom was working on the breaking news stuff and on the web, not on the print edition. And you never get to leave. You would just be constantly and perpetually updating stories, changing stories, adding new content. It would be an incredible grind. I have such empathy and respect for the journalists who are trying their hardest right now to try and share the right information and make sure people are caught up with what's happening, as well as trying to give them the best information possible to make sure that they can stay healthy as they go through this stuff. Get a bad rap, the journalists, but they're working hard for people out there.
Yeah. Anywho, I think it's time to pack it in for another day.
Alrighty.
All right. Until next time.
Stay safe, kids.
Okay.
Likewise.
All right. Bye.